busy bee. You've got a big writing project on the go at the moment.
It's always something.
It's always something keeping us off the streets.
At the moment, yeah.
But I think what I'd love to sort of chat and explore with you, Steve, because, there are so many layers to you and so many interesting things. And I've known you since we were with the Snappers at the Underground.
Yeah.
Being fabulous and free at the Undies.
Yeah, kids.
How many years ago was that, Steve?
Oh, nearly 40. Or 40. The Underground opened 41 years ago. So.
Oh, God.
The summer of 78, 79.
What the hell? Okay. So I suppose
Time flies, doesn't it?
It does fly. When you're having fun. What I'd really love to unpack and just share with the people watching us on the other side of the screen is emotional resilience, and I know, you're in your 5th decade like me, Steve, and with each passing decade. 6. Are you in your 6th?
I'm in my 6th decade.
Have you?
61 this birthday.
Bloody hell, I didn't realise you jumped over.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, Chris is 62. So, I'm nearly there. But so when we look back at those decades, each chapters, we often have to do I always sort of say we often have to do a reboot. And in each chapter, often there is a turning point where we either connect and try and upgrade and become better versions of ourselves, and sometimes we do a U-turn and stay where we are. Where would you like to start, Steve? Because there are so many times in your life where you've had to do a reboot and upskill emotionally. Where do you think you'd like to start your story today?
I suppose I think this is an ongoing journey. Part of the human condition is that we never get everything at once.
Yep.
It wouldn't be as much fun and as much drama if all of a sudden we came into this earth and we understood everything. So for some people, I think it's easier and it's less of a battle. Some people wear life like a loose garment. Some people like me are trying to figure out what's going on. Why is this the way it is? What? And that can be a good thing. Yeah. That can be it can give you entertainment, but it could also bring a certain amount of despair. And I think it's the complexity of it. What are we looking for? Who are we? Where do we get our cues from? Why is this happening to me? Is it his fault or is it my fault? Is it their fault? And does
anyone have to be at fault?
Yeah, it's the journey. It's just the journey. I know it's a lazy cliche, but it is what it is, and you take it and you cop it on the chin and you make the most of it.
Sometimes we cop it on the chin, but sometimes it knocks us down. Sometimes we're on the ground, and I just want to talk about those times. But just in what you just sort of said there, when I'm doing talks for young girls or young boys at school each week, and exactly what you said, I'll say to them, yes, as women you can have it all, but not all at once.
No.
And if you try and have it all at once, you wouldn't be able to manage. You want to be able to enjoy each chapter.
I think there's an inherent starting position in all this, and that is that life is hard.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and there are going to be some really hard bits, and you're going to have to face them. And if you manage to escape unscathed, you're a very rare beast. Absolutely no doubt, because life is, there's things that are going to happen to your kids, there's things that are going to happen to your parents, there are things that are going to happen to you, and you're going to have to accept, I think, that's life, and you get on with it. And but that sounds all very easy. Just the concept, just get on with it, isn't very fashionable today. When we look at victimhood, and when we look at woe is me and self-pity and those types of emotions, sometimes I can be in that seat very much. I wish this hadn't happened. I wish this hadn't happened. But these days I'm inclined more to be, well, it all happened for a reason. And I've got a strong belief in karma. And I think things do happen to you for a reason. And I reckon at around about the age of 61, 10 years sober.
Yay!
I think 10 years on May 4, 2019. I think one of the big emotions with me is gratitude, Cynthia. I think that you look at it and you say, well, that's been fun. There's been a bit of everything there. There's been, I've had a little boy who died. I've had a lot of friction with my parents who are now deceased. I've had joy and fun with them. I've met my birth parents. I have an extended family. From a career point of view, I've had wonderful opportunities. Boys' own opportunities, really. But it's all been hard work. That's the thing. Does that make sense? It's all been hard work to have that sort of lifestyle, to have that sort of stuff. You don't get that stuff without having to work really hard to achieve it. Some of it's fallen in my lap, absolutely, but the rest of it's been, what do I do now? Bite off more than you can chew and then chew like hell. That's been the philosophy.
Steve, I remember I really felt like I started to get to know you. We've known of each other, as we said, for 40-odd years. But I remember we were privileged a few years back to do a series of workshops together, and we travelled around.
A great time.
It wasn't a wonderful time, and I think we did 57 workshops in all, and I remember listening to you every workshop, and even though we were doing similar material, just watching you put your heart and what I love to call articulate every single time you spoke about the death of your son, when you spoke about your adoption issues, when you spoke about these big turning points and amazing times in your life. And as you know, people that have never heard of us before, we are both recovering alcoholics, and I remember May the 4th because my oldest son got sober, and I remember we were in the middle of doing the workshop and I got the call and he got into sobriety, so that was 8 years ago or whatever. But I also remember having a discussion with you because I think during our workshops you were going through the anniversary of your son's death, and you were really quite sad that day, and we were chatting just quietly, I think in coffee break between, and you were sort of saying, look, I don't want to get into self-pity, and I see this with a lot of men. And I just wanted to unpack this a little bit and get your thoughts, because you are a guy that's you're incredible entertainer, and you do a lot of amazing voices, and we can talk about that later, and you've been a newsreader, and you've been out there in the media a lot, and you've obviously been a man that's been providing and protecting and putting his best foot first and trying to do the best for his family for many years. But what I do observe with men of similar temperaments like yourself is that and it's interesting, for people that have watched the beautiful interview I did with Carla, Steve is the beautiful husband that also supported Carla through her health challenges. So you have just had so much hard stuff, big assignments.
I think to a certain extent, part of the bonus of all that is it tends to take a lot of the focus off me. There's other people who require my attention rather than me spending. If I spend too much time alone inside my own head, Cynthia, that can occur to my detriment. So I need to spend time with other people. I need to spend time observing how I can help them, how I can how I can make their lives better. I find now I enjoy my own company a lot, so I tend to poke around and dart around a bit, and I know this is something that's with your emotional fitness program is something that I learned, the ability to enjoy one's own company, and it was only when I felt pleased with the person that I was becoming that I was able to do that. So that's been something. I think a lot of it's to do with self-care. A lot of it's to do with looking after yourself. A lot of it's spending time in concrete pursuits. Spending time in doing things that are worth something rather than things than spending a lot of time just being destructive to yourself and to other people.
I think
it's all part of the learning.
Absolutely. And you said something really pivotal then, Steve. And I think, again, getting back, and I know I'm generalising, but I do see this with a lot of men of your era and age, and my husband included, that and it's interesting, when you look at your beautiful wife, Carla, you're a great giver as well. You like to give and share and look after other people. And you said, you don't like to spend, you didn't used to because you've done so much work on yourself over the last decade, but you didn't like to spend too much time alone in your own head because you weren't pleased with who you'd become in your early recovery. Yep. And I remember us having that conversation around the anniversary of your son's death. And I suppose my focus is helping people because being of high intellect and a high achiever to help you because you were really reluctant to.
Yeah, I don't like to think of myself as a high intellect or a high achiever. That's very nice of you to say that.
Let me finish this point because I actually observe you and you don't have the opportunity to receive you. And I observe you and I've watched you walk. You have to have high intellect. You have to be able to recall data. You have to be on your game, Steve, and that's how you are. I understand your inside world might not see that, and I remember you being
it's all work to me a lot of the time. It's all like being the tradesman. It's all, someone needs to fix a washer on a tap or someone needs to fix a light bulb. I can get out in front of an audience and I can entertain them and make them laugh.
It's what I observed you struggling with in the early days, and you've obviously, as I said, done a lot of work on yourself, been able to. It's not so much spending time in your own head, but in your own heart. And I noticed you were reluctant because I remember my therapist saying to me, and I said these words to you on this day because you were sad, and you were really trying to put the handbrake on and saying to me, I don't want to get to self-pity, I don't want to get to victimhood. And I said to you, Steve, there's a big difference between sadness and self-pity. And on the day around this time when your son passes, similarly to some of the trauma and stuff I'd had to work through in my childhood, and I often say to my therapist, I can't fucking shake this sadness. And he said to me, Cynthia, you'd become a robot if you did.
Mm.
There comes a certain point in time in life where you must surrender and just feel the sadness. That's not self-pity, that's not depression, but be with your heart as you would to your beautiful children. If they were sad, you'd sit with them, hand them the tissues and go, love, be sad. This is sad, sweetheart. Have a cry, let dad give you a cuddle. But again, that whole becoming the parent, your reluctance to actually give yourself any empathy and compassion, you were going through a sad patch. And I just was really trying to encourage you, Steve, you are not being indulgent. You are not being a martyr. You are not feeling sorry for yourself. This was a very sad day. And I have nothing but respect for you because I just cannot imagine how the heart recovers. And I'd be interested in your perspective. How the heart recovers from the loss of a child. How old was your son when he passed?
He was 11 when he passed away, nearly 12. Valentine's Day, 1999. And I think you never recover from that. There's other things that you can just shrug off, and there's other things that you can say, oh, well, that's done and dusted. But something like that visits me on a daily basis. And there's guilt. He was a little boy who had a very bad birth and cerebral palsy and epilepsy and had a very, very difficult life and a lot of sadness. And beautiful boy was Freddie, and he passed away at a very young age. He got pneumonia, as a lot of those kids do, and he was no longer with us. And there is not a day goes by where I don't.
How old would he be now?
Feel in his 32.
Yeah.
So there's not a day that goes by where I don't feel an intense anger that the doctors that were present at his death couldn't have done a more professional job. Really, could I have done more to have prevented this, or who's at fault? Who's to blame? So, trying to, you know what? A lot of the time I say I just don't want to talk about it. That's my defence. That's my defence mechanism to that. I don't want to talk about it. I had long conversations with my father, who's a doctor, who's a medical person, and he advised me against legal retribution and this type of thing. He's very much from the, he's an old country New South Wales boy, and he grew up in the Great Depression and World Wars and was in the Air Force and these sorts of things, and they get on. They're from that get on with it generation. Very difficult for my father. Good man, good community man, did a lot. Aimed up and made himself useful. But as far as an empathetic understanding or an ability to put his arm around someone and say, he was a man of principles, and one of his principles was that he never told anyone he loved them. He felt that was a weakness. And I remember him once saying to me, I think you tell your children you love them. You love them too much. And I said, that's because I was never told. And I knew how much I needed at that age to be told. I needed someone to put their arm around and say, you can't even begin to know how much I love you and how special it is for me to be your father. That's a mantra with me and my kids. What's Dad? Proud of me and he loves me. What does Dad love being? Being my dad. As they flit off to school, those are the last two words I say to them. That's the little exchange that we have. And I often speak to people who are parents of adopted children.
For our viewers, they don't understand. So you were adopted, Steve?
Yeah. I was adopted when I was two weeks old, at a time when this was the done thing. A young girl here in Brisbane got pregnant and decided to put me up for adoption. So I'm lucky to be here because the father was a copper, and he made it known to her that he could have this matter fixed up very, very quickly. And but she persisted. She was 21 years of age, so I'm here thanks to Joan, and then I went to live with Frank and Helen in Toowoomba, and had a lovely environment, lots of opportunities, good schools, good education, but not a lot of. There's very little reinforcement of lost emotions that I was feeling. Like, where am I? What am I doing here? Do they love me? Are they going to take me back and swap me for one that works?
So how long when you were told? Sorry,
as early as I can recall.
They told you straight up you were adopted.
Pretty much straight up. Yeah.
And what did you say to yourself?
I just thought all kids were adopted.
Did you?
I did.
As a young man.
I didn't. I didn't until about the age of 11. I just thought you went to the hospital and picked a kid up.
Okay, and then when you found out,
that's what it was like in Toowoomba.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of questions asked and questions answered.
Yeah.
You just go with the flow,
And so when did the penny drop that that's not how it worked?
Probably about the age of 12, when old Bluey White gathered us all there in grade 7 and told us the facts of life. And I went, oh, really? Because we just didn't have any other outlet for that. It was a very conservative environment, the one that I grew up with.
When you were worried about being taken back, was that after 12 or all the time?
All the time.
Were you naughty, Steve? Were you a naughty boy?
No, I could be angry. I could be angry, and I didn't. They were emotions I didn't understand. There's sort of the emotions that we come to understand as defects of character. Isms, they are sometimes referred to. Short-tempered, prone to lash out occasionally, constant need for approval and love. Those those latter two, the constant need for approval and love, were like a fire in my belly, and they propelled me through my teens, my 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s to about the age of 60 when I said, enough.
But Steve, I'm sorry.
And that's, various things can propel kids to the people that they become.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, there is absolutely no doubt, and I think you'll find this with most people in the entertainment business, that what lights the flame and ignites the flame and keep it burning is a desire for some sort of approval, some sort of validation. I'm not unique. I'm not unique in this, and that was able to take me to a lot of good places as well.
Yeah.
But there was a level. There was, at the end of it, it was, well, that's done and dusted. That was good. They all think I'm fantastic, and sometimes, of course, being a comedian, they didn't think I was fantastic. And
Steve, you say so much gold, and I'm sorry I keep going to interrupt you, but there's so much great stuff you say, and there's something interesting there. And again, absolutely
tell me what that was.
Respect your right to disagree with me, but because we're both addicts, we know about defects of character and those behaviours and those isms, which, ISM being an acronym for inside me. Now, I would absolutely agree that the approval addiction and all of that is a component of the addictive predisposition.
Yeah.
But I think all people, of course, we all prefer approval.
I think all people experience
absolutely,
that emotion. But I think the physiology and the clinical research would indicate that kids that are adopted, kids that are abandoned by their mothers and made aware that they've been abandoned by their mothers, have probably I'm looking for the word. It's a bit out of proportion.
Absolutely.
Other kids that grow up in a warm, loving sort of environment.
Yeah.
If you're an adopted kid, you're not hugged. You're not told that you're loved, all those types of things. If you've got that environment, you're looking around.
Absolutely,
for some form of
something to fill that void.
Does she love me? Does that girl like me?
Yeah.
Oh, she's rejected me.
Yeah.
She doesn't like me either.
Yeah.
I've got to find someone that likes me. Very strong emotions. Now, what I'm saying to you is that it took me a considerable amount of time to mature out of those emotions.
Sure.
Out of having those emotions guide my every move.
Yeah.
Got to find an audience, got to find someone that says, I'm fabulous. Got to find someone that okay, that's been done. So it took a lot of time, and a lot of self-appraisal and a lot of self-examination to move beyond that, Cynthia.
Yeah.
I wish it had happened when I was 13.
But you wouldn't be as fabulous.
But it didn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It didn't happen when I was 13.
Sure. And they say youth is wasted on the young. Just getting back to that point I want to make, and we're going to have beautiful Kath Clancy, who's a specialist on adoption and addiction, and she'll be able to, expand on that. But the point I was trying to make there earlier was you said something very interesting, and I think this doesn't have anything to do with a defect of character, because too often, this is just my point of view, I believe addicts see anger as a defect of character, where I see anger as a red flag that always symbolises, and when I'm working in detention centres or in jails and rehabs and people say I've got anger issues, I always say, and Kath Clancy was, I think, the first one that unpacked this for me, when a person has excessive anger, my first question is, where's the loss? Because anger is a component of grieving, and I don't see anger as a character defect. Rage and aggression, absolutely. But anger is always a marker or a red flag that person has a perceived loss going on and they're grieving. And I do also believe that even though you were adopted at such a young age, you grew up as a child that had a sense of loss, because you and I have both nursed our babies from the moment they were born.
Yep.
And if you take that baby away from that biological mother that has incubated it for 9 months, there is attachment issues. Because they are taken away, there is no biological.
They recognise that. The science now says it's not just going to live with someone else. They say that physiologically there's a trauma.
Yes.
There's a very real and serious trauma, as traumatic as anything. Absolutely. If you take a baby away from the woman in whose tummy that child has lived for 9 months and suddenly put it in a bassinet and take it to live somewhere else. And they say at the time the baby is undergoing a lot of stuff that it can't articulate. They've done studies on it. So I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. They call it the primal wound.
Absolutely. And I think
but it gives me but it's given me and Kath Clancy was someone who was able to give me a lot of help. In this. It's given me a greater understanding, and I'd recommend anyone that is having just this feeling of, I don't know, is it not fitting in or disconnection or something like that? Sometimes it needs to be unravelled And listening to you speaking just then, I was able to identify perspective. You see, your view of an anger, someone else's view of an anger, of an ambivalence, of a hostility, can be adjusted by their perspective of it. So if you hear another perspective or read another, acutely aware summation of something, you'll get a different perspective on it. So perspectives a lot of the time are what we search for.
But I think also too, anger is a word that so often gets laced up inaccurately with rage, violence, disrespect, and abuse. And anger is none of those things. It really is just a healthy red flag that we all come equipped with that goes up. Now, what we hope in an ideal world is we have a mother and father that when the child gets angry, the child learns calm assertion. Own your anger, but don't shame or blame yourself or anybody else. Now, I think at that subconscious level, an adopted child has loss, has that wrench, because we know the child's sight, smell, taste, touch, sound, pre-verbal is bonded to that woman's body. And that loss, that subconscious loss, and this feeling of anger, just this anger in the heart, as you said as a young boy, that was inexplicable, but it was just also very present. So it's a really interesting dynamic that you explore. And I think anybody watching this that has been adopted, I think there's a beautiful saying, most people spend the second half of their life getting over the first. And this series that we're doing,
I think it's very, what you say there is very real. And I think I've spent a lot of my life trying to unravel this. And it was a generational thing, and that was this. There was a lack of tenderness, so we don't show those sorts of emotions to it. And it wasn't just me; but my father didn't show a lot of affection to his wife as well. They loved one another desperately, but I never ever heard him say to her that he loved her. And I think it was just the stoic generation of men, and what they did by having this principled view that we do not hug. We do not put our arms around people and say, I've got your back. I'll always have your back. You go out there and live your life and I'll always be here for you if you need anything, mate. Go and get them. And there was you've got to do the right thing. Got to do the right thing. It's got to be done in a certain way. And I have, for years was very angry about that. And a lot of the time, when I went through life's greatest challenges, my father was unable to relate to that and understand that and identify any sort of role for him to play in it. He would just go. When my first marriage broke down, when my son died.
What happened first? Did Freddie die first, or the marriage broke down first?
Marriage broke down first, and then Freddie, trying to. I was very confused, very, very, very confused as a young man, juggling a little boy in a wheelchair and all these sorts of. Didn't do a lot of that very well.
What was happening with your drinking at that time?
Oh, pretty bad. As bad as it ever got. But it was a very difficult time for me. I would say words that would describe me at that time were immature,
confused,
bewildered.
Yeah. Were you in the media in that time?
I was a master of the universe, okay, and it all came crashing down. So it was as great a fall as you could possibly imagine, and I managed, I'm a pretty good scrambler. It's often been said that I do my best work with my back to the wall. So a lot of those emotions that I'm talking about made me quite self-sufficient, so that I was always able to say, right, we're going to have this figured out by Friday, mate. What are we going to do? Put on a shirt and tie and go and make an appointment, go and see someone that can help. So that type of thing's always been pretty strong. I mean, there's self-sufficiency. But I would say at that particular time, and that's a while ago now, that's a while ago. Insanity is often, when you're in the grips of addiction, insanity is often an inability to make, a bad idea becomes a good idea. Inappropriate behaviour becomes appropriate behaviour. There has been in my life from time to time an inability to make the best choices. So tremendous strengths in some area, but weaknesses in others. So we're working to do better at that.
And I think
Took me a while.
What a lot of people don't realise, I mean, you and I actually see my addiction and my alcoholism and drug addiction as a gift now, because it's a non-negotiable. For those people that do medicate on alcohol, I think, getting back to you saying, your inability to make wise decisions, the reality is alcohol's an anaesthetic. So it anaesthetises that part of the brain where we make decisions. So it's not rocket science that you make shit decisions when you're on the piss. And we are at the top end of alcoholics, but people that when you go through the death of a marriage and then the death of a child, emotional anaesthetic, and alcohol is a pretty socially condoned weapon of mass distraction. In Australia here, people, have a beer, have a drink, that's kind of what we do. But I think... And
they say kids that come from that adopted background are more prone to drug and alcohol things. So there's a little bit... I think that one of the positives in this is an ability to identify where some things may have come from. There was also a genetic disposition to this on my birth father's side. Yep. Very strong drinking gene that I may have inherited. So it's good to be able to it's good to be able to develop a greater understanding of who I am and why I felt the way I did sometimes.
And I think anybody watching this, the whole debate of whether it's nature or nurture, to me, quite honestly, is irrelevant. It's only relevant to the person.
Yeah.
Because most people have a patchwork of experiences, and some, I too, like you, identify with the gene coming down from our family of origin, but like you, I also have trauma from sexual abuse and physical violence, and you had your trauma from adoption. So I think when you've got that nature and the nurture, we kind of got the double whammy. What I'm interested in, Steve, and I remember when and us both being writers, and I wanted you to tell us a bit more about this current project and some of the writing that you've done. But and again, it's very interesting. Many people in the creative arts, entertainment, writing, that have a rich internal world are often, of that addictive predisposition. But when I came back from the Amazon in 1990, and you interviewed me, because our paths have been crossing for years.
Yeah.
What was happening in your life at that point in time? Because I remember, you were on a morning show then, weren't you?
Yeah. I've done a bit of everything in my career. I came down here and I studied drama and journalism and Australian history, 3 fields that sustain me to this day to do an arts degree. A couple of years ago, I was the special guest at the conferring of degrees in the arts faculty of University of Queensland, from where I got my degree. I received my degree, in 1980, and I thought there's great irony that one of their worst students was asked to come and tell.
Don't you love that?
I love it. Tell the arts students about the adaptability and the practicality and what can actually happen if you have some studies in the humanities. And I worked with the Queensland Theatre Company for a couple of years. I sold photocopies at Xerox, which was like you've got a creative type, but then you've got a business, a 4-year business academy. You would almost call that. It was one of the great American selling programs instituted in a lot of other companies. Xerox itself, a manufacturer of photocopiers, had developed a training program for their salesmen, which was used by other companies as well.
Wow.
So it made me aware of some commercial realities about an ability to go and come up with an idea, then go to a company and say, "Will you back me?"
Yeah, you're good at that.
No, so that was a breakthrough moment. And then I went and worked as a comedian for a while, had some radio Then I lost a job working. I'd won an award as the best newcomer in Australian metropolitan radio, and then about a fortnight later, I was out. I was out of a job because the program director didn't feel I had any more use for the station. So, I've had to duck and weave a lot of the time, and that was fortuitously at that time. Then at the end of 1989, it was. I identified a need for a book to be a season by season guide to the history of what was then the New South Wales Rugby League, which is now the National Rugby League. So I wrote a book, and I went and saw Bernie Power, and I said, "Will you back me?" And Bernie said yes, and that led to a role at Channel 9 and that show in Brisbane Today, which I did with the lovely Fiona McDonald.
And that's where that's
where our paths crossed where our paths crossed again. So a bit of this and a bit of that. Yeah. But what it was, I was always able to say, there's an opportunity in that. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to leave what I'm doing and put that to one side. But in my business, I'm not the Beatles, so I've had to be very versatile.
But you're bloody brilliant. And anyone who hasn't, can I just interrupt you here? Steve does amazing caricatures. And I remember when you were talking in these 57 workshops that we did, you're very good at painting a picture, and you were talking about being an art student. And I actually wore this robe to interview you today because you spoke about being a bit of a Hugh Hefner with a robe, and in those days.
Oh yeah, well I had a good. See, I grew up during the. I've always had a very vivid imagination, and one of the things that was I grew up. James Bond, Simon Templar, The Saints, Jason King, Department S, Roger Moore and Tony Curtis, The Persuaders. I mean, that was me at the age of 11, sitting watching that stuff and saying, that's me when I grow up. Very, very strong, all that. And
mentors.
That's what we had as male role models in those days. And they were all heavy drinkers, hard, loved the girls. Yeah. But so that's Robert Wagner in It Takes a Thief, and I loved them. But Tony Curtis, Steve McQueen, and the Thomas Crown Affair, that sort of stuff. Yeah. That's me.
Your house here is even very James Bond. For people
you.
Who don't know that, you want to go to the loo at Steve's house. There's this hidden door, and you just click and you walk into this Ralph Lauren kind of Hamptons toilet and bathroom, but it's all very slick.
I loved all that stuff when I was young, and who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Who would? Batman?
Oh God, yeah.
So those sorts of things, and I always believed that even if you can't do something, look like you can do it.
But
and that may sound that. So that's. I know you like to play dress ups too,
a dress
and that makes a big. That has always been, if we, he looks like he knows what he's doing.
But Steve, you could always follow through. Now, again, the voices I remember. Now, I remember seeing you in a Sir Les Patterson suit.
Yeah, it was a big. That was my big Russ Hins.
Oh, sorry, Russ Hins.
So the characters that I used to do in the old day were Joe and Molly Meldrum and Stefan, who was fantastic, and we used to do. Could you give us a little bit of them all? Could we just do a little bit? Because they're so good, Steve. Watching Steve do it 57 times at workshops, I laugh every time. I suppose this is like, Stefan, hi, how you going, Cynthia? I love your hair.
Thank you, darling.
And you use my products, and that's terrific and fantastic for you to see me again. Hi. And then, see, all these people are very old now. Yeah. Molly Meldrum was a great. Yes. Molly Meldrum changed.
You used to have the hat, didn't you?
Molly Meldrum changed my life because at the age in 1985, I looked at a show called Star Search, which was like an earlier incarnation. Greg Evans.
Oh,
it was like Australia's Got Talent. It was that type of show. Yeah. I went on there with my Molly Meldrum. I went, oh, hi, great, do yourself a favour. That type of thing.
And you had the hat and everything.
The hat. And all of a sudden, within the space of 12 months, I'd left working as a photocopier salesman, and I was doing very very well at it when I was doing it, Cynthia.
Yeah.
And I then said, I'm going to do this comedy. I'm going to do this comedy thing. So just these little. I've been very fortunate in that when opportunity has knocked for me, some of them have been really good opportunities. And I suppose the bonus of being a bit live by the seat of your pants, which is my existence. I'm not a doctor who goes and opens up his surgery in the morning and sees 100 patients and does that, and he'll do it the next day and do it the next day and do it. I've always had to come up with a new plan, and that seems to have been good for me.
Do you know what? I do think that as an addict, we are high stimulus personalities. And what we're doing here is a passion project. And as I said to you, I've been sober 24 years. And as much as, I've written 6 books and I love the dynamic of recovery, but to do something that excites me and to sit and talk to people, there's so much wisdom to tap into the just in my hometown of Brisbane, there's so many fascinating people. And just as we go through every decade, as you sort of said, you've gone from being, and again, Steve, I don't think you're hearing yourself. There are not a lot of people that can go from being a photocopier salesman to winning Star Search because they put a hat on it. I mean, dressing the part is half of it, but there's that talent behind it.
I think to a certain extent we're all creatures of necessity too. So sometimes we've just got to do it.
Do you notice what you just did then? Because I'm sure people watching this will notice. You deflect any compliment or praise on a regular basis. Do you know you do that?
Look.
Do you know you do that?
Life is hard. You're not that important. You're going to die. Your life is not about you. There's some of the things that I think I think thank you is better rather than making an excuse.
But do you notice that deflection's a part of you? Do you notice that you deflect and divert? Because these things that you're telling me are impressive.
Yeah.
And anytime I go to acknowledge it.
Well, look, thank you for your kind words. And it's nice that you say that. I really think apart from being one of the luckiest men in the world, apart from having had some wonderful experiences and have met some fantastic people and that have been able to spend a life fashioning careers that I think things that I'd want to do. I mean, there is a lot in that. It really just worked out. It really just worked out that way. And it really just worked out that way. It just
Steve,
happened that way.
You've heard that saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
And you've worked bloody hard for a long time.
Yeah.
And as you said, having things that have knocked you to the floor. And you said something at the beginning of our chat, which I found very interesting, and I'll be interested at the end to get your conclusion. We'll get to that. But would you mind telling the story about how you found your sister and being the newsreader that you were and how that unfolded when you met?
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
You mentioned earlier the need for constant entertainment. I was working at Channel 9 at the time, and I was watching a cricket match one summer in 1995 it was, and this game was getting particularly boring, and I was sitting there and I think, I know what I'll do. I'll go and find who the real parents are.
As you do.
As you do. So I made a phone call to the Department of Child Services or something like that, or births and deaths. And there was no caveat on my information. This was at a time where if you happened to be a parent, a birth parent who had put a kid up for adoption, if you didn't want to have anything to do with that child, you could put a stop on your information. Neither of my parents had done that. So what happened was I within a fortnight had met them both. One was living out at Carina. I remember one night driving past us.
Is this the police officer that wanted to...
No, the police officer was down. The police officer was down The police officer lived down the coast. So I was told, I was advised by a counsellor, a lady called Leilani Garland, who was very, very helpful to me. She was referred to me by the Department of Births and Deaths that handled this adoption service. And she said, what you've got to do is you've got to send a letter to these people if you've identified where their address is. My name at birth was David William Wild.
Oh, it's kind
so
of,
that's got a bit of the persuaders about it. David Wild.
That's a bit.
I think one of the persuaders was a Wild, if by my memory. Tony Curtis was a Wild.
Yeah.
So what I did was I sent this letter off, and within 45 minutes of my birth mother receiving the little letter basically saying something quite innocuous, like I was born May 31st, 1958. I'm interested in learning any information that you may have about my birth. So within 45 minutes of her receiving the letter, I was sitting on her back balcony out at Carina having a cup of tea with my birth mother.
45 minutes?
Yeah, 45 minutes. And within a day or two, the copper rang me up and said, I'll meet you down at Twin Towns and we'll have a talk about this. So I went down to see him because his wife had opened the mail that had been sent to him at Benora Point.
Oh, wow.
And she'd seen a photo. Didn't know? She didn't know. The birth mother had told the man that she subsequently married and the father of her other three children. I was earlier. I was the
love child.
I was the love child. And so, sadly, I have a very, very close relationship with my brother and sister on my father's side. Both of them say that you're more like our father than any of us are. So but sadly, he got dementia and passed away. This is the thing that can sometimes happen. Before I got to know him, because he's an interesting man, my birth father. He's a highly decorated policeman, won a Queen's Medal for bravery, which is the highest, which is like the police force's equivalent of a Victoria Cross for hauling people out of the Coolangatta Hotel fire in 1975. Really interesting man. His wife, before she passed away some years ago, sat me down and said, "Let me tell you what your father was like."
She gave you the dirt.
She gave me dressing down, and she said, "You need to know this. You need to know this." She was a lovely woman. My birth father's wife. Not my mother. This is the woman that my birth father later married after I had been born. She was the reason. She was one of the strong reasons why my sister Marisa and David and I have a strong relationship. She's an Italian woman. This boy is your brother. You must look after him. Beautiful. So she was a big. She had that heart. That love. She had that love inside of her. But sadly, as sometimes happens, we lose these people. But I did get to sit down with her and have a heart to heart with her before she left us in the Marta as she sat on a bed and told me what this man is like. And she said, "You be better than that. You make sure."
Was he a drinker?
Yeah, heavy drinker.
Yeah. Now, for those that watching this, Marisa, your beautiful sister, who's another woman of great charity and beautiful soul. But I've had a few chats with her, and I remember her telling me that she used to watch the Channel 9 news and watch you read the sport, going, "God, he looks like Dad. God, he looks like me." For years before she knew you were her brother.
Yeah. Well, when I sent the letter with the photo into it, and the inquiry with the photo inside it, and the inquiry about my, May 31, 1958, and the wife opens the letter. She says, "You've got a son." That's the first thing she said to her. "You've got a son," because I'll show you a picture of him and you'll get. you'll see where, I'm my father's son. Absolutely no doubt about it. And completely different from the parents that I went to live with in Toowoomba.
Yes.
Like the person, I'm him to a T, you know, and you know, but as far as the people that I went to live with, I don't know. I don't know whether they've ever come to terms with what they brought home in the bassinet that day. I think that was a bit of their thinking. What have we signed up for here?
Really?
I don't know. They were unable to express any other. I was unable to glean any other conclusion from what was communicated to me during their lifetimes. I'll leave it at that.
Now, I want to just...
And that's why, as I said earlier, that's why I hug the kids. That's why, parents, if you've got that, you gotta let these young people know that you're in their corner. Absolutely. That you're in, I'm in your corner, mate. You know, that's it. I'll do my best to be your father. I'll be the best father I can possibly be for you because I love you. You know.
I think mentors regardless of gender are important for all of us. But what I observe in working with men of your era that have had an absence of male mentors, and the beautiful thing about life is you can always find them. And I think what's interesting, and I know my husband who lost his father at a young age and then went on to boarding school, tended to find, and again, this is just a female perspective, so you correct me if this doesn't apply, but I've observed your love of AFL and NRL and cricket and sports, because you were a sports reporter after, amongst many other things. And what I notice when I work with young men that are elite sportsmen, doesn't matter what code, what I do notice, and the men that come to work with me usually have an emotional trauma or a wrench, that there's been a family breakdown for a variety of reasons. And what they have found in sport is one, a mentor, a captain, a patriarch, and camaraderie.
Coaches.
Absolutely. And it's almost
people around the club, volunteers, good people.
Yes. I see it in, I know some of the work I did in New Zealand a few years back, even young lads in bikie groups. It's that, because we are hardwired for inclusion. And as you said, as a father, but as a father, you need a young boy that they say psychologically, a young female, her first hero is her mother and her first love affair is with her father's heart. And for a young boy, his first hero is his father and his first love affair is with the mother's heart. And the great news is, even if that was a shitty relationship, you can always become a mature age student like we have, reboot, clean out those viruses and get back on with living. But I think it's really interesting. And again, tell us a bit more about your book. But you have been an avid supporter, we're sitting out here looking at an AFL oval, of sports. And I remember in watching you deliver your keynotes as a historian, but watching also too these good men. But what I do notice in sports is you get, albeit under the banner of the team, there is passion and connection, and that, to use one of Brené Brown's terms, you're in the arena. You're having a crack.
Look, I couldn't agree. You've hit the nail on the head. I've had a number of my kids, especially my son, who still plays football in Melbourne with Old Xavier College down there, and I've seen the positive effect that working in a football team can have on people. And I make this specification here in that it's not necessarily sport as per an NRL club or an AFL club. It's a club on the next rung down, where they're playing it for love, not money, where they all have jobs, where they all have fairly normal lives, and they come together as a group 2 or 3 nights a week, and then they play on Saturday, have a beer, and then on Monday they go to work. That is as good an environment for a young person as you can get.
Yeah.
I've seen hard evidence of it in my kids. They learn to mix with people. They learn to social with people. They can run. They're running around the Oval having a yak to a guy, talking about work, talking about the things they're doing in my life. They're going to get married in a few weeks. They're going to buy a house, and I've just finished uni, and these things, and my son went to Melbourne knowing not a lot of people, and immediately he's in an environment.
Just to pause you there, because people watching this may be confused because you've got a few children. Freddie has passed. So
yes.
you just so for people watching, who you've got, how many children now?
Katie, who's 35 this birthday. Grace, who's 30. George, who's 21. And Billy, who's 10.
So you're talking about George?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So no, I'm talking about all of those kids. All of those kids have had a sporting environment.
Right.
So we're talking about mentors.
Yep.
The whole thing. There is no better. So we can talk about young men, but of course, as far as rugby league and rugby union and AFL is concerned, young women. This is the juggernaut that has almost overnight doubled in size the amount of people participating in the sports that I just named. So it warms me. We do what we can to help that club, and there's a number of other clubs. I'm also involved with the Valley's Diehards over at Emerson Park, and help them in whatever way I can, because community's coming. I do like those community clubs where you can go and sit with a mate on a Saturday afternoon and watch the team and talk to those people, and on any Saturday afternoon, Billy will come with me, and the president of the club will throw him the ball boys high vis jacket, and he'll go and be the ball boy, and we'll do it together. We'll go and chase footballs around. So all that sort of stuff's really, really good, that community sport. And I like the people that these clubs attract to. The people that populate those clubs are good people who are giving of their time to help young boys and girls have a good football experience. Good people that give back are the sort of people that I'm attracted to, people that make themselves useful and get out and help other people have a good time. Yeah.
Steve, so with regards to your writing and your passion for writing.
Speaking of football clubs, you'll love this. My favourite football club when I was a kid growing up in Toowoomba was the Valley's Roosters Rugby League Club.
Right.
Very famous club, red and black.
Right.
And towards the end of last year, they rang me up and they said, "We're turning 100 in 1919, and would you come along and be our Master of Ceremonies at our centenary dinner?" And the Lord works in mysterious ways, Cynthia Morton, but I look back on that and say, well, that's just a box ticked. If you had a thought, that little kid trying to find his way in the world, always parked near the goalpost behind the fence, watching the under 16s and the under 18s before he got home for wrestling at 12 o'clock.
Wrestling.
The wrestling.
That was the thing on telly,
wasn't it? I love the wrestling. World Championship Wrestling when I was a kid.
Do you still watch it now?
Oh, I love it. The three boys all like the wrestling. I like the wrestling. If you could have imagined that, if you had said to that little kid, that when this club out here turns 100, you're going to host their centenary dinner for 600 people at the local church hall, I would have said, stop it. But But isn't it funny? These little things. Nothing could mean more to me, and it's not. I'm not being paid to do it. I'm doing it because it's actually in my DNA to do it.
Yeah, it's a gift.
And those sort of opportunities. Some of those opportunities come my way. When the Toowoomba Rugby League turned 100, they had their celebrations a couple of weeks ago. I was asked to write a little chapter in the book just to tell people what it was like, during the glory days of Toowoomba Rugby League and watching and following. So love, those sort of things. Those sort of things come to me, and I'm eternally grateful that they do.
And I think you spoke earlier about karma, and I think some people say to me, why don't you charge for some of the things you do? And I say, well, because when I work in a detox centre, the voluntary work and the charity work. I mean, you and I make make our money in our private stuff, but the charity work, some of it I would pay to do, to
Yeah.
go into Outback and work with Indigenous kids or wherever I'm asked to go when it's a charity environment where you can actually give back and walk away going, oh my God, that was just the loveliest thing to be able to give it for free and for fun and just be a part. And you know, if you have a look at, I was saying to your wife Carla in her interview, there's that beautiful saying that we must become the parent we needed when we were younger.
That's
and
it.
You just said, if I could talk to that little boy now as the man you are in your early 60s and say, mate, you're going to get to do this.
I tell him, if I could talk to my younger self, I would say to him, don't worry so much, mate. It turns out okay in the end. You know, that's a great philosophy. Great philosophy of mine. But on that, there was another thing that I wanted to talk to you about the sporting teams and the value of some of these people. We had a very highly credentialed sporting coach by the name of Lindsay Jones, who was
I remember you telling me about him.
he was a guy. He was a guy that came to Toowoomba Grammar, and he was a guy who'd been one of Australia's top runners, late 50s, early 60s, after the Melbourne Olympics. And he came up there, and little Toowoomba Grammar that never won anything came second in his first year. So he had carte blanche at Toowoomba Grammar. We'd never had a success like this. And one of the things that he taught me, which was one of the salutary lessons in my life, and it remains with me to this day, is that if you want to play with the big boys, you've got to do the amount of work that the big boys do.
Yeah.
So if you want to win a GP, and I was never a runner. I'd never shown any talent for running at all. But he said, there's a radio sheet of paper with the training you've got to do on a daily basis. You do that, and I reckon you'll come second at GPS, or something like that. Would have been 14 at the time. So here's a guy that was able to say this to a number of people to ensure that Toowoomba Grammar was a force over the 20-year period that he was there, Cynthia. A guy who was able to communicate to young teenagers who would say, yeah, I'll sign up for that. Oh my God, I am better.
Wow.
But the amount of work that you had to do would make your eyes water, Cynthia. I've still got radioed sheets up there, the amount of work that Lindsay would make you do. But it's the same. You can't win a GPS swimming event doing a couple of laps 2 weeks before the thing. You've got to train all summer. You've got to have done it for the last 3 years. You've got to lift it up, and you've got to give everything that you possibly can. Lindsay said, you do that, you'll be a good runner. And, that's the...
Were you a good runner?
Well, I had a Stephen Bradbury moment in 1975 in my final year when I ran the first leg of the 4x medley relay, which was an 800, a 400, a 200 and a 100. An unusual event. It was only run a couple of times. We finished third, and a bit disappointed. I would have liked to have done. We did our very best, but the first two teams home were disqualified for an incorrect baton change, so we won. So Brisbane Grammar and Churchill were disqualified for incorrect baton change. I remember walking along with my dad, and he had his arm around me saying, "Well done, mate. Good as gold. You did your best." And I remember hearing the ground announcer saying the results of the open 4x medley relay for Brisbane Grammar and Churchill have been disqualified for an incorrect baton change. So the first team home is Toowoomba Grammar. And I remember never feeling so much. And there it was. Lindsay had got us across that line. If you want to be good at something, you've got to do what the people who are best at it do.
And what he did in that lesson for you as a 14-year-old boy backed you to tap your potential. He gave you a formula to tap your potential. That was the formula.
Well, mate, if you want to do that talk for that audience and you want them to laugh, you better give it 100%, mate. Don't go skirting around it and get lazy with it. You can get in my game, you can get bitten very hard in comedy and that type of thing. You can get bitten very, very severely if you don't do your preparation and know your mark.
I remember you taught me some amazing things on that tour because, we would sit in airports and planes, and I'm accidentally funny. It's never intentional. My boys would probably roll their eyes because I don't. But sometimes I find I'm accidentally
I can
funny.
be accidentally funny too.
And I remember you saying to me, because, you and I didn't really go from the script, and I remember you saying to me at the airport, Cynthia, that line you say, whatever it was, you said to me, be quiet, don't keep talking, let them have their laugh, let them enjoy their laughter.
Yeah, that was your laugh with the little girl.
Oh yeah,
remember going across the street, which was
with
that was good advice. That's a good line, mate. You got to.
But not knowing that, and that's your comedic training, saying you've got to then pause and let people, and it just made perfect sense that when you're having a laugh, you don't want it to be interrupted because you're going to keep listening to what she's saying next. And you told me to pause and break, and I always remember that.
You'll get a good laugh if you give them the time to laugh because you know it's coming.
Yeah.
We all know where the laughs are in our show.
And that's what I found fascinating about watching you do the same, pretty much.
You might get one impromptu laugh here and there, but most of it's, mate, there's a lot. They don't laugh. If they don't laugh at that, I'm screwed. You know where the laughs are.
And it's interesting too, and I suppose so there are some things that are just intrinsic truths, laughter and tears, that articulation, it's an involuntary language of the heart. And every time I watch the movie Notebook, I cry in the same places, and I watched you 57 times deliver your comedic component of your keynote, and I laughed in the same spots every time, and I knew they were coming.
There's a bit of a science to everything.
Yeah,
so some people make it look like they're just out there and they've grabbed a microphone and they're just talking at you.
Yeah.
But I don't have the luxury. I've had to do the old Lindsay Jones preparation.
But nobody would know
really
that.
hard at it.
Nobody would know that.
Yeah.
And therein lays the skill, isn't it? A great actor, you think it's actually them. You don't think they're acting, but they've done all that prep work.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you one last thing, Steve? I'm really keen just for our viewers to learn about, because I get a lot of people ask me this, and I just think, you're such a great orator. I'd really love for you, for anyone watching this, that, so 10 years ago you put down the booze. Can you talk about that time where, sometimes it's called a rock bottom for some people.
Yep.
What was happening for you there?
Well, I got to the end of my drinking career.
Yeah.
And I think I'd realised that, and the people around me had realised that, and I had the good fortune of being given an ultimatum. So I was sort of shoehorned into giving up alcohol by a wife who'd had enough, and she had the strength to be able to say no, and I was aware at that time that
How old were you?
I just turned 50.
Yeah.
I think I was about to turn 51.
Yeah.
And I realised at the time, if you decide to say, well, I don't want to be married anymore, I'm going to drink as much as I'd done. I'd already done that once with my previous marriage.
Yeah.
I'd say, well, you don't want to be married here. I'm going to go and rent a little flat and bad choices. Bad idea becomes a good idea. Fortuitously, there were amazing positives that saw me meet my wife and my current wife and go through this journey with her. But it's the best thing that I ever did. And what it is the positives is I was able to put on a new pair of glasses and see the world with different eyes. That was not as much resentment, not as much ill feeling. There's a lot of stuff that I've had to figure out as I go. It didn't all become apparent overnight. But now that I haven't, I don't miss it. I don't miss it at all. It was proving to be destructive towards the end, and it needed to stop. And I had a little boy who'd just been born, and I thought, good idea for you to put the cork in the bottle, as they say, and stop drinking. And I have a fair bit to do from time to time with people afflicted by alcoholism.
Yeah.
and I know that the great majority of them never ever see a solution in front of them. No. I had a wonderful solution which worked for me, and a lot of the people, the number of, if I had $1 for everyone that I've suggested, well, mate, there is a solution. If you want to give up, there are places you can go and people that will help you. Yeah. And they say, oh, giving up drinking is a bit drastic. And I'll say, well, your wife doesn't speak to you. She wants a divorce. Your business is being, you know yourself that you're drinking too much and that's affecting everything around you. Kids don't want to talk to you. And you think it's a bit drastic to go and get some sort of help that might be on, and it's really sad. It's really sad because it's a terrible affliction, but to have been able to find something to do about it has been one of life's great things for me.
The gift of desperation.
That's right. I had the gift of desperation. I had the help of a lot of good people who helped me and gave me support along the way.
So, Steve, tell us about I'd love to hear a little bit more about, because, you've written some amazing books, and again, in sports. What's the one you're working on at the moment, or is it still
I'm working on, I have the great privilege of being able to tell the King's story, which is, of course, our version of the King here in Queensland is Wally Lewis. So my last book was a story of the old Brisbane Rugby League. I saw a need to tell that story in the face of a lot of criticism. Oh, that's old. That story, that competition hasn't been around. And I said, no, there are people my age who grew up on Valleys, Wynnum, Manly, and Brothers and Souths, and trips to Lang Park with their grandfather and their dad on a dusty Sunday afternoon. And I thought, I'm going to have a crack at this. And we had tremendous success with that. But what I recognised, and I had hard evidence of this as well, was that the great character in all this, a man who changed the way Queenslanders thought of themselves, a man who said, well, we don't think we're winners and everyone else thinks we're losers and we don't know anything and we're stupid and we walk around with a bit of straw hanging out of our mouth and all that. Wally said, no, come with me. This fierce competitiveness of this and tremendous preparation, of Wally Lewis. I said, this humble story of a humble man who went on to be this iconic figure by his deeds alone, by his tremendous drive to win. And I identified a deep affection that people have for him, and far beyond. He's a guy that's had to deal with his hardships in life and his setbacks in life, and he's a really interesting character. And his family, and the Lewises that came before him are interesting people as well. Knockabout people from the Petrie Terrace area back in the old days. Lost an uncle. First Walter James was lost in the last charge of the Light Horse in Palestine. A couple of months before the end of the Great War. From there on down, you've got interesting people that Wally's grandfather was a hairdresser up in Petrie Terrace. He died an alcoholic's death. He had a very bad experience in the war himself, and so Wally's dad was raised by his grandfather and his uncle. Two very strong role models turned Wally's dad into the man that he would become. Family support, we get on with it and we go. So he's got the most, Wally Lewis has the most compelling story imaginable.
And as a young, fall-down drunk girl in Brisbane, he crossed my path, and I actually sat next to his son on a plane down to Sydney, maybe a decade ago.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I don't know.
Young Lincoln.
Young Lincoln. He was going to do a movie or an audition or something. And I was made, as you know, making amends in our recovery is a part of our whole story. And he was a gentleman that I remember being a fall-down drunk, maybe 17 or 18, and I remember him being very kind and very considerate to me. And I never forgot that.
He's a great bloke. Willie's a great bloke.
And I remember sitting next to his son being very chatty and, about the, same age as my son. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I may never cross paths with Wally, but I'm going to tell his son
Yeah.
how much of a gentleman and a great character his father was.
You always got a nice word to say about someone.
Well, I was a full down drunk, and I just remember him being a true gentleman and just making sure I was okay. And I remember that in a drunken blackout as a very young woman. So I'm, you know, it was.
You got him on a good night. He was a wild boy.
Well, he was very, you know, he was
he was famous. He was famous.
Very gentlemanly and very kind to me. And I remember it was a lovely thing to be able to tell his son that his father was a lovely character as a young man, because that was my recollection of him.
His mum and dad did all they could to imbue him with, you know, those qualities. They're good people, Jim and June Lewis. It was a real privilege of this exercise to be able to spend a lot of time with them. They're just people who get on with it.
Do you know, just in finishing up, Steve, I have to reflect something back to you, and again, this is just someone who's known you for over 4 decades. And first of all, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
I know you're a busy man, and I really appreciate you being a part of this community web series that we're you know, you and I are both here trying to pay it forward, and hopefully.
I hope I've been useful.
Oh my God! But I just want to say to you, Steve, you use that term, good people, a lot, and I'm here to tell you that if I had to write a list of good people, and to be honest with you, I did write a list, and they are the people that in this first series I wanted to interview, and you were right up there because you are one of the good people, Steve. You and your wife, you know. I don't think I know a person that knows you that doesn't have good and kind things to say about you both. You're both very generous in the community with your charities. And you're receiving homework there, Steve. You're not deflecting me. Well done.
Well, that is a lovely thing to say.
But I honestly feel it. And I was looking forward to, and my husband's here behind the camera, and I was sort of saying I really am looking forward to chatting to Steve and Carla because, and I'm so glad we did an interview as a couple because there's just so much in your individual stories. And, you know, so when's your book due out, Steve? What's your timeline?
Next year. I'm keeping it
open.
open. No. Next year's the 40th anniversary of the first State of Origin match, so we'll tell the King's story. Wally Lewis, My Life.
Wow.
So it's got an archive. His mum and dad and Wally and his beautiful wife Jackie have kept this archive that's like the Mayan treasure with all these photographs and wedding photos and this, so all that sort of stuff, little photos of Wally's first photos and things like that people haven't seen before.
Beautiful.
So it's going to be it's to suddenly find you know. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and say, how about that? Sometimes I look at it and I go, you've got so much work to do. Remember Lindsay Jones, remember the work that has to be done. And sometimes I say, how did you have this lovely opportunity to be able to do this? And the support for the project is from a lot of places has been forthcoming as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Steve, for people that want to follow your project and your launch and everything, are you on social media? Can they follow you?
Yeah, they can have a look at the Our Game Facebook page, it's called.
Okay.
Our Game, which was the name of the previous book, but at some stage we'll be reverting that website as the Wally page. So
because we've got a lot of, you know, different, I've got some AFL and NRL and people involved, so sports.
Anyone interested in my book can go to my website, which is www.stevehaddan, Haddan, so it's STEVEHADDAN.com.au.
So they can keep up to speed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm easy to contact, no trouble.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Good on you.
Okay, bye.